It was very common for me to be home alone at night. I lived only with my dad, and his work schedule constantly changed. Some weeks he worked days, other weeks nights. This happened during one of his night shifts. I stayed up late, as usual, watching movies in the living room. Falling asleep had always been difficult for me, so I would often lie awake long after turning everything off. That night was no different. After finishing a movie, I turned off the TV and went to my room. I lay in bed, staring into the darkness, waiting for sleep to come. Minutes passed, maybe 30. Then something fell inside my closet. It was a small sound, like a toy tipping over. I frowned. It wasn't too unusual. My closet was messy, filled with old toys and random stuff. Things falling over wasn't impossible. Still, something about it didn't feel right. I held my breath, listening. Silence. I almost convinced myself to ignore it. But then, the closet door moved. At first, just a slight shake. Then again, creak. The handle slowly twisted. My heart stopped. I stared at it from my bed, unable to move, unable to even breathe properly. The door was unlocking on its own. The closet door slowly creaked open. I didn't move. I couldn't. Every muscle in my body locked up as I watched the darkness inside the closet stretch outward into my room. Then, nothing. No footsteps. No movement. No sound. Just silence. A suffocating, unnatural silence. Panic took over. I quickly pulled the blanket over my head, curling up tightly, trying to make myself as small and as quiet as possible. I didn't dare breathe too loudly. Seconds felt like minutes. Minutes felt like hours. For what felt like an eternity, there was nothing. No sound. No movement. Just that horrible, crushing stillness. Finally, after what I guessed was about 2 minutes, I couldn't take it anymore. Slowly, carefully, I lowered the blanket just enough to peek out. And that's when I saw it. A figure standing right next to my bed, looking down at me. I froze. It was tall, dark, and completely still. I couldn't make out its face clearly, but I could feel its presence, heavy and suffocating, like it didn't belong there. Then suddenly, it turned its head toward the window, as if it had heard something outside. Without a word, without a sound, it simply walked away, out of my room. I didn't move. I didn't scream again. I just pressed myself against the wall, staring at the doorway, waiting, hoping it wouldn't come back. I stayed like that for nearly an hour before I finally gathered the courage to move. Slowly, I got out of bed and stepped into the hallway. Empty. The house was silent again. I checked the front door. It was wide open. Whoever or whatever that was had left. I didn't sleep at that night. And to this day, I still wonder how long it had been inside my closet before I noticed. This story happened to a 16-year-old girl. She used to live next door to a boy named Joey. At first, he just seemed awkward, but over time, it became clear that something wasn't right about him. Every time she went outside, whether it was to get some air, check the mail, or just sit in the yard, Joey would appear. Always. It was as if he had been watching her, waiting for the exact moment she stepped out. He was 17, quiet, and strangely isolated. No friends ever came over. No one ever visited him. He was always home, watching. She tried everything to ignore him, avoiding eye contact, giving short responses, walking away quickly. But he didn't get the message. If anything, his behavior only became more intense. Eventually, she had enough. One day, she confronted him directly. She told him clearly and firmly that she didn't like him and that he needed to leave her alone. The look on his face in that moment, it wasn't normal. It was the kind of angry, distorted expression you might expect from a child being denied a toy. But this wasn't a child. This was a 17-year-old boy, and there was something deeply unsettling in his eyes. From that day on, things only got worse. One night, her parents left her home alone. It was quiet, just like any other evening. She sat on her bed, focused on a school project, trying to ignore the uneasy feeling that had been following her ever since that confrontation. Everything seemed normal until she felt her bed shift, just slightly. At first, she thought she imagined it. Maybe she moved without realizing. But then it happened again. A slow, subtle movement beneath her. Her heart began to race. There was only one place that movement could be coming from. With trembling hands, she slowly leaned over the side of the bed and looked underneath. And then she screamed. Joey was there, lying under her bed, staring straight at her. His eyes were wide, unblinking, and filled with something dark, something obsessive. He began to crawl out. That was enough. She bolted out of the room, her heart pounding wildly, and ran straight to his house next door. She rang the doorbell over and over again, panic flooding her voice as she told his parents what had happened. They looked shocked, terrified, but Joey never came out of her house. That's when she called the police. Despite his parents begging her not to, she refused to back down. When the police arrived and searched her home, they found him, still inside her room. He was arrested on the spot. Later, they discovered something even more disturbing. Joey admitted that this wasn't the first time. He had been hiding under her bed more than once. And in his room, the police found photos of her, dozens of them, scattered everywhere. But the worst one was a picture of her sleeping, taken from inside her room. I lived out in the countryside, far away from neighbors. The kind of place where silence isn't peaceful, it's unsettling. Most days I spent my time alone. On sunny afternoons, I would go outside, lay in the yard, and just relax under the open sky. It felt safe. Until that day. The sun was bright, the air was warm, and I was lying on a lounge chair, letting myself drift into that calm, lazy state between sleep and awareness. That's when I noticed him. At first, it was just a shape, a figure standing deep within the woods, watching me. I slowly sat up, my body tensing instantly, my eyes locked onto him, trying to make sense of what I was seeing. He didn't move, didn't wave, didn't speak. He just stood there, staring. A cold feeling crept through my chest. I forced myself to speak, raising my voice just enough to reach him. "Do you need something?" For a moment, nothing happened. Then, he stepped forward, out of the shadows of the trees, and began walking toward me. As he got closer, I could see him more clearly. He looked off, not just like a normal person asking for help. There was something unsettling about the way he moved, the way his eyes stayed fixed on me. He stopped a few feet away and said he lived somewhere up the hill. Then he told me his water pump was broken and asked if I could come help him fix it. Every alarm in my head went off at once. There was no way I was going with him. I forced a quick excuse, telling him I was about to leave and didn't have time. It was a lie, but I didn't care. He stared at me for a moment longer, then slowly turned and walked back toward the woods. I watched him the entire time. He disappeared behind a large boulder, vanishing from sight. Only then did I move. I quickly folded up my lounge chair, rushed inside, and locked every door and window in the house. My hands were shaking. I tried to calm myself down, telling myself it was over, but it wasn't. About an hour later, I realized I had left my sunglasses outside in the yard. I didn't want to go back out there, but I also didn't want to lose them. So I cautiously stepped outside again, scanning the area carefully. No sign of him. The yard looked empty, quiet, too quiet. I searched for a minute, then finally spotted my sunglasses in the grass. I bent down and picked them up, and when I stood back up, my blood ran cold. He was there again, this time much closer. Half of his body was hidden behind the shed, as if he had been waiting, watching. I didn't think, I just reacted. "I'm calling the cops," I shouted, my voice shaking. Then I ran, straight back inside. I locked the door and actually called the police this time. They came, took my statement, and searched the area, but they never found him. And thankfully, I never saw him again. This happened when I was very young, around 7 years old. But I still remember it as if it happened yesterday. I was staying at my grandmother's house like I often did back then. She was a strict woman, independent, tough, and not the type to worry too much. She had never driven a car in her life. Instead, she would walk everywhere, no matter how far it was. One day, she decided to walk all the way to the library, which was about 10 blocks away. I didn't want to go. I was just a lazy kid, more interested in staying home than walking that far. So, she left me alone. Before leaving, she gave me one clear instruction. Don't open the door for anyone. At the time, it didn't feel like a big deal. I stayed in the living room, watching TV, completely unaware of how quickly things were about to turn. After a while, the phone rang. Curious and careless, I picked it up. Hello. There was a man on the other end. His voice was calm, but something about it felt wrong. "Who is this?" he asked. I answered without thinking. "Danny." "Are your parents home, Danny?" "No." A short pause. Then he asked again, "So you're home alone right now?" I hesitated for a second, but still said yes. Looking back, I realized how dangerous that was. He kept asking questions. "Where are you right now, Danny? Do you know your address?" I gave him a vague answer, something like somewhere in Queens. There was another pause. Then he said softly, "All right, Danny, bye-bye now." And the call ended. At the time, I didn't think much of it, but that phone call was only the beginning. About an hour later, there was a knock on the door. My heart skipped a beat. I remembered exactly what my grandmother had told me. Don't open the door. So I stayed on the couch, frozen, staring toward the entrance. Then a voice came from outside. "I see you on the couch, Danny." My entire body went cold. Slowly, I turned my head toward the window, and there he was, standing on the porch, staring directly at me. He looked exactly how you'd imagine a nightmare. Unkempt, grayish hair, a rough beard, and eyes that felt wrong. I couldn't move. I couldn't speak. Then he smiled. "I've got some candy in my truck," he said. "Come on out, Danny." That snapped me out of it. I jumped off the couch and ran as fast as I could to the guest bedroom where I had been sleeping. I slammed the door shut and locked it. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely hold the knob. Moments later, I heard something from the back of the house, the sound of the door handle being forced, then banging. Thud, thud, thud. He was trying to get in. I covered my mouth, trying not to make a sound, my heart pounding so loud I thought he could hear it. Then, suddenly, I heard my grandmother's voice outside, loud, angry, yelling at him to get off the property and that she was calling the police. I ran to the window and looked out just in time to see the man running to a beat-up pickup truck and speeding away. My grandmother tried to memorize the license plate, but she couldn't. Still, she reported everything to the police. After that day, my mom never trusted my grandmother to leave me alone again. And honestly, if she had come back even 10 minutes later, I don't even want to think about what could have happened to me. I had just moved into a new house. It wasn't anything special, just a small, quiet place, perfect for one person. At first, everything seemed normal, but that didn't last long. Almost immediately, I started hearing strange noises. At first, it was subtle, faint scratching sounds coming from inside the walls. I heard it in the kitchen, then in the bathroom, and eventually even in my bedroom. It was always the same kind of sound: scratch, shuffle, scrape. I told myself it had to be an animal, maybe rats, maybe something trapped inside the walls. That explanation made sense. At least, it felt safer to believe that. But then, other things started happening. My food began disappearing faster than it should have. Milk, bread, leftovers, everything seemed to run out too quickly. At first, I blamed myself. Maybe I just wasn't paying attention. But deep down, I knew something wasn't right. Then, one night, I woke up suddenly. The room was dark, silent, except for breathing. Not mine, someone else's. It was faint, but clear, slow, steady, right there in the room with me. I froze. I reached over and turned on the lamp. The sound stopped instantly. The room was empty. I sat there for a long time trying to convince myself it was just my imagination. But no matter how hard I tried, that explanation didn't feel right anymore. The next day, the heat became unbearable, so I decided to turn on the air conditioning for the first time since moving in. At first, everything seemed fine, but then I noticed something strange. Some of the vents weren't blowing any air at all. One of them was right next to my bed. That didn't make sense. Curious and slightly uneasy, I grabbed a flashlight and crouched down to take a closer look inside the vent. What I saw made my stomach twist. There was no duct behind it, just an empty space inside the wall, like something had been removed or never installed in the first place. A cold feeling settled over me, but I tried to ignore it. That night, the heat made it impossible to sleep. I tossed and turned, flipping my pillow over again and again, trying to get comfortable. That's when I heard it again. Breathing. This time, there was no doubt. I was fully awake, and it was louder, closer. It was coming from my left. Slowly, I turned my head toward the vent. My heart pounded so hard, it felt like it might burst out of my chest. With shaking hands, I reached for the flashlight again and pointed it toward the opening. For a split second, I saw nothing. Then, I screamed. A face, right there, pressed against the inside of the wall, eyes wide open, staring directly at me through the vent. They didn't blink. They didn't move. They just stared. I dropped the flashlight and ran. I didn't stop, not until I was out of the house, screaming for help. Later, I found out the truth. There was a man living inside my walls. A dangerous, unstable man who had somehow been hiding there, watching me, listening to me, and eating my food the entire time.